Okay, we're live. Thank you, everyone. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining in. I'm sitting here. My name is Matt Bailey. I'm going to start with that before I tell you who I'm introducing. I'm sitting here live with Dave Withers, the master distiller from Archie Distilling Company, who's going to give us a bit of a rundown, a bit of a chat. We're going to have a bit of an informal chat like we did last week with Johnny Edwards from Lark. This is going to be a great chat for us to talk with another amazing distiller, an Australian distiller, and talk about what he's doing, what he's working on, where we're going, where we've been, a bit of society history, a bit of Archie Rose history, and go from there. So can I introduce Dave Withers from Archie Rose Distilling Co.
Thanks for having me, Matt. It's awesome.
For sure. I've got a few drams on my table. I've just seen you've got one in your hand as well, ready to go. And I'm going to ask you a few questions and then we'll have a dram or two. But what have you poured to start with?
Sort of fitting one. As you know, I'm a bit of a rum fan. So this is Jamaica Me Crazy. It's a rum R7.2. It's pretty funky and super delicious. So I'm really excited. I think the bottle's almost done. I've been holding out on finishing this one off. So yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I know you're a rum fan, and I know you're especially a fan of those funky style rums as well.
Yeah. I feel like there's some days when you get home and you just need something that's really funky and just hits you in the mouth and just kind of like fill in your mouth. Yeah. That's some
hits you in the mouth. Yeah. Awesome. Now, I want to start with a bit of background. I've got a bit of a saison going, a bit of a cleansing ale. But I'll pour a dram in just a moment. I think we're getting a little bit of sound feedback there, a little bit of an issue. That's okay. I'm going to start with a question for you, Dave. Can you give us a quick rundown of sort of your professional background, how you got into being a distiller? I know you. We've known each other for a decade or more, so I know that your background at Archie Rose and your background at Oak Barrel and all that kind of stuff. But give us a bit more context there.
Yeah, so I suppose I got involved in whiskey probably a decade ago, and it was really thanks to my missus, my now fiance. So yeah, I used to be involved in wine and mainly on the sensory side, and probably would have ended up going down a wine production route, to be honest. My dad's a winemaker, my grandfather's a winemaker, so it was kind of in the family, in the genes. And yeah, I started working in a place called the Oak Barrel, and about the same time, my missus kind of turned me to spirits and whiskey, and yeah, I started getting pretty into that, and managed to jump over to Archie Rose when we first started up as production manager, and moved basically from sort of basic production managery stuff into sort of full running of the distillery, and then all my qualifications, so diploma in distilling and all the rest of it, and basically moved into the master distiller role. So yeah, it's I've been part of Archie Rose basically since the start, and yeah, we've got some pretty exciting things sort of coming up. But yeah, that's basically me. I've been very fortunate, very lucky, a lot of hard work, and managed to get where I am.
One of the points you touched on just then in relation to Archie Rose was you said you joined, and I know this already, but for those who are watching along who might not know, you joined in as part of the core first team. You were right there from like day zero of the whole sort of setup of the distillery in that core team, and much of that core team is even still there today. So what is Archie Rose doing differently when it comes to amazing staff retention and otherwise that you don't normally see, especially don't see in hospitality, but you rarely see even in production of spirit?
Yeah, look, I mean, we've been growing so rapidly, and you and I talk quite a lot. I don't think it's a very poorly kept secret that we're starting a new distillery just down the road from our original Rose Free distillery, and it'll be in addition to the distillery. And I think, there's some pretty cool innovation there. We really back our team. We love having people stick around. We love people sort of growing with us. We're just hiring now for a cellar hand position. And, that role is all about someone coming in, super junior. We're going to give them a chance, basically teach them what they need to know, pay for their education, all the rest of it. So we're really big on like helping people to grow within the team. Yeah.
Yeah, awesome. And that's really amazing to see. And I love the fact that it does feel like such a family at Archie Rose. That was something that was, again, quite different. You see it many other, not just distilleries, but businesses in general. But it operates like quite such a family, but it also like very open community of, there's no sort of secrets about which barley you're using or which casks you're filling into.
Yeah, we're really open. We're trying to be really transparent. I mean, I think it's a lovely thing to be fully transparent, and it's so important. I mean, people want to know. You know, like a lot of the people that are tuning in now, Matt, you would know, really want to know exactly what the society casks are and what goes into it, and where all the gritty details, and that's so important. You know, for us, I mean, I hate to bring this up because I think it's just been slamming the news of late, but you know, just about every craft distillery in Australia is making hand sanitizer at the moment, right? But really, our motivation behind it was just about getting our bar team, which had to be stood down, back into the distillery, back into production, and basically giving them a job, finding them alternative work, and bottling and packaging. And so yeah, I mean, it being part of the family, it was pretty tough when we were looking like we're going to have to stand down our team, but we managed to find them jobs, and that's really the incentive for us. It's not about making a buck; it's about keeping people in jobs. So
yeah, and that's obviously very topical, and I think it's amazing that you've found a way to re-employ, if you like, or repurpose the entire bar team into a capacity that fits the current narrative, and I think that's really important. For them and for the community, and as you say, for keeping them in jobs.
Yeah.
But anyway, you've opened a society rum. You're on a society rum. So if you're drinking Scotch Malt Whisky Society Spirit, and I'm going to drink a Archie Rose Spirit just to balance each other out, because, if we're always on brand with our own product, then, we don't get the opportunity to enjoy others. So I'm going to open, I've already poured it, as you can see, a San Diego Heritage Rye Malt Whiskey from Archie Rose, one of your project releases in a sense, your trials and exceptions releases. Tell us, what is it? What am I drinking?
Oh wow! How long is this live stream?
What's it? Condensed.
one of those products I could really go to town on and be quite poetic about. But so you've just used a couple of words, and I'll explain what they are. So San Diego is a small town in New South Wales, and basically there's a variety of rye that was grown in San Diego, and it was grown by a farmer for 60 odd years. And it was, what happens when you grow barley or malt of any kind is it tends to try and adapt. So it basically over 60 years evolved and sort of produced not just one strain, but a bunch of different strains. Like if you look at the rye in your hand, you can see they're slightly different colored, they're different sizes and all the rest of it. And it's pretty cool, like it's a coping mechanism. So basically that rye, which was purchased about a decade ago by some fourth generation farmers in New South Wales, they purchased the rye and they started planting and malting it. And so this is literally, like, I suppose, New South Wales own rye variety.
So this is the New South Wales whiskey made in New South Wales, distilled in New South Wales. It's essentially a state. It doesn't get much smaller than that when it comes to production in many ways.
Whiskey inception is what it is.
Yeah.
So yeah, and so we thought it was pretty cool, and we really like it, and we have this big thing. If anyone knows or sort of follows Archie Rose that much, that we kind of really do focus on the malt. We believe the malt matters, and so for us, we thought it was really cool to kind of try and show people that difference. And when it comes off the still, it is such a different spirit. It's almost like a rum agricole, but a really cool character, quite
Purple's a good word for it. I think I sent you a message about this. As you said, we talk a lot about these kind of things, and I sent you a message about it. It's like herbal sausages and black tea, which is, I don't often get that. You especially don't see that much in a rye, let alone any sort of whiskey. But and what I love as well is that it's, when you're talking about rye as a grain, it's often that American style rye that is, I find, is just like black pepper sauce, and sort of it's very straight up black peppery kind of notes. But I don't get that in your rye or your San Diego rye. And by the way, a big congratulations again for world's best rye.
Yeah, thank you.
Bloody hell.
Yeah, that's a big one. Yeah, no, you hit the nail on the head, Matt. I mean, so we wanted to make a rye because we believe in the grain and the importance of the grain, but we wanted to make a rye that was very different to American style. We didn't want to make a spice bomb. We wanted to make a rye that was a sipping rye. And a lot of the American style ryes, there are some amazing American style ryes, right? But a lot of them do tend towards like doing very well in cocktails. Whereas we wanted something that was really not only did well in cocktails, but also stood up to kind of nosing and sort of neat appreciation. So that's the sort of style of rye. It's sort of somewhere between a Scottish and American style, and Scottish, sort of space side, I suppose, and an American style. I mean, it's pot stilled, so it's very different. I mean, there's no column distillation with this. That's a very different style.
And I've got to say, it must be cool for you because, as I was remarking on before about how your journey at Archie Rose it's not like a new role for you. Just like my role at Society is not a new role for me. You've seen the progress of what's changed and what you've distilled now being bottled. So some product that you distilled is now being bottled, which a lot of distillers never ever get the opportunity to see, especially if they're retiring. If you were retiring soon, it'd be sort of like you wouldn't get a chance to taste things like this or whatever. But it's sort of, it's like laying down stocks that might mature for the next 40 years or something kind of example, things where you don't get that opportunity. But it's kind of cool. Do you think it's awesome that you get to taste something that you distilled and has been bottled?
Yeah, that's pretty cool. I mean, the other thing is being able to blend it because, the blending or the marrying, I suppose, I don't really like the term blending, but the marrying of the casks at the back end is, it's quite a in-depth process. So being able to see the inputs, the differences between the casks, and then also being able to pair them up to kind of create this final product, that's pretty cool. It is very cool.
Yeah, awesome. Now, if I can ask a question about your society history, as many will know, Archie Rose and SMWS have a great relationship as a partner bar relationship, and possibly more. But it's the one thing which I wanted to mention was you said you've been a society member for some time. How long do you reckon that's been?
Must be pretty close to a decade, I'd say. Yeah. So one of the first tastings, I think the second tasting I ever went to was SMWS Royal Automobile Club. And I was blown away. I mean, it was such an experience. Big grand room, so many people.
With Andrew hosting?
Definitely. And so many people getting really into it and calling out different descriptors and so on. And that was a pretty eye-opening experience. That would have been 2009, I think, 2010, probably 2010. Yeah.
And
so good long.
Yeah. Do you remember your first ever cask that you picked up?
I don't think I do. I think it may have been a Kilhoman.
Oh, right. Like a 129.
Yeah, I think so. One of the really early ones, but I can't say for sure. I'd have to think about that one. I've definitely still got that Kilhoman as well. I know we've spoken about it a few times, but...
We have spoken about it before, yeah. I think I know which one you mean. I think you showed me you had a bottle of 129.3 or .2 or something.
Peach Posset or something like that.
Yeah, Peach Posset. And you think that was the first ever bottling you picked up?
I don't think it can be, but I've definitely still got it. That's why it's sort of fresh in my head. So, yeah. At that time, I was a Kilhoman, and still am really. But yeah, and Port Charlotte as well. I did do quite a few Port Charlotte, so there was probably a Port Charlotte before. Yeah.
Is that your kind of whiskey? Would you say that Port Charlotte has a sort of a profile that you? Well, the question is: are there any sort of profiles of sort of existing whiskies around the world or Scotch whiskies that inspire what you do now?
That's a really good question. I think when I was like first into whiskey, I like the really big bold flavors. I think we all go through, right? Like the big sherry bombs, the big peat bombs, And I think now I tend to enjoy much more cerebral whiskies, like ones that are a bit more nuanced and got a little bit more character, and probably a little bit more restrained. And I think that pretty cool. I mean, there's some pretty cool whiskeys being made out there at the moment. Some guys doing some pretty gnarly stuff. So yeah, I definitely think there's going to be an interesting kind of new wave of whiskey coming online. Don't know that there's anyone particularly that I would call out, but yeah, there's a bunch of cool stuff out there.
Which might lead into the question of differentiation when it comes to in market of great whiskies. I think it was our mutual friend Chris Middleton who once said that anyone can make a whiskey, but not anyone can sell it, kind of thing. And it was sort of, he had that sort of phrase like, there's a lot of distilleries now. And so it's kind of like this, well, I mean, worldwide, there's a lot more distilleries now than there were even 5 years ago or 10 years ago. It's that explosion, of course, is massive. That point of differentiation, it's very evident in Archie Rose, but for other distilleries out there, what would be a tip from someone like yourself if someone else was looking to start a distillery, say, and they were looking for that point of differentiation?
Yeah, I think that's a really important question for everyone, right? Why do anything unless there's like a reason for you doing it? I mean, for us, we try and celebrate the malt and we try and celebrate the process, and that's really important to us. You know, my background's wine. My dad's a winemaker, so the place and origin of things is really important to me. Being a New South Welshman is important to me, and to everyone else that works at Archie Rose as well. I think if you're starting up a distillery, I think you have to have a very specific thing that you want to share with the drinker. I think whiskey is a form of expression, right? You're creating something as a tradition, and if you are not making something different than what's already out there in the market, then well, why are you making it? That might be a bit harsh, but I think that there's a lot of amazing whiskey being driven by trying to achieve something very different, and trying to do things very differently, and backing that up with a good technical understanding and a good understanding of what people want. And yeah, there's definitely, I mean, some amazing whiskies being out there. I mean, one of our, you know, one of the other biggest distilleries in Australia is Starward, right? And sort of looking at what they're doing in the market is pretty inspiring. You know, they had a very specific vision for what they wanted to do, and Twofold is a great example of a product where from inception they wanted to bring something in that was really accessible, had a really lovely fruity profile, and could also find its way onto the back bar of a lot of bars and on-premise venues. And I think they've done a really great job with it. And that's why it's been a success, because people can see that it comes from the right place, and there's passion, and there's also drive, and also the willingness to take a risk a bit.
It's funny you mentioned Starward. I distinctly remember a tasting that I went to with Dave Vitale, the founder of Starward, hosting it in Sydney. And he, the main driving point of what he was talking about with the product was his reason for being, reason to exist. Is the reason for it to exist. It had to have a reason to exist. And every time someone had a question about, oh, it's do you do it, like, is there a peated Starward? And he'd say no, because it's not, you know, we don't see a naturally that much peat around our distillery, so there's no reason for us to include it, kind of thing. And it was a very interesting point though about the, you know, geographical and reason for being, reason for existing, I should say, of the product.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think, you know, to talk about society, I mean, the reason for being has always been about appreciation of good quality whiskey, and spirits in general, not just whiskey. For me, I mean, my reason for joining the society a decade ago was that camaraderie. You know, there were a lot of people that I was affiliated with that also went to society tastings, and they, you know, there was often that sort of idea of congregation or community or belonging that went with the society. And I think that is, you know, clearly something you're doing here, Matt. I'm going to shout it out, right? I mean, during COVID, you know, it's not like we can go and, you know, have a mass tasting or anything like that. But something like this, in the sense of community, it's like it's bringing people together and their shared love. And yeah, that's pretty cool.
I really appreciate that. I mean, part of these streams is us bringing knowledge and bringing discussion to our members. And I really appreciate you joining us tonight. I'm just going to take just 1 second for everyone who's been tuning in. There's a lot more guests now than there was 20 minutes ago when we started. So a big shout out to everyone who's tuning in. For those who missed the beginning of this, I'm chatting here with Dave Withers, the master distiller from Archie Rose, who it's good timing as well because, you know, isolation times and a chance for two old friends to have a chat. And of course, on the back of the win of World's Best Rye, I'm holding a bottle of it right here. If you haven't got your rye yet, grab a bit of rye. It's always a bit of fun. And also a sneaky plug to say that we've got some lovely ryes coming through the SMWS soon. But I mean, on that point of the reason for existing, going back to that for a second, one of the parts of the society that I most connect with and I love talking about is that Pep Hills, who founded it in 1982, was bottling single cask. I mean, never mind that it was single cask, but he was bottling single malts from distilleries that didn't do single malt releases. They didn't have core ranges then. So the society was the first to bottle Glenrothes as a single malt. It was the first to bottle Brora as a single malt. It's like they did not exist as single malts before that. They were always in blends. So the reason back then started as a reason to get to extract some of the best of what they were doing and bottle them for our members. And it's still that reason today. It's just far more of a community now. And I think that community aspect is what you sort of touched on there. And I see that when it's open, of course, in different times. I see that when I'm at the bar at Archie Rose. It's a sense of community. It's a very warm and welcoming place.
Yeah, the community is so important. And I think that, you know, in my personal journey, like just kind of talking about, before we were talking about one of my first tastings with the society. And I remember, you know, that all going to a lot of those tastings and kind of understanding that you can have the same distillery and completely different flavor. That was just mind-boggling to me, particularly from the wine world where you talk about vintages. Like vintages is the thing, you know, you trace the vintage, you go look at the producer per vintage. But I think the equivalent in whiskey is single casks, where you say, this cask is so different to the one next to it. And you're trying to track down what that core characteristic from that distillery is, despite the variation in the cask. And that can be so cool. I think that, you know, it's particularly on my end when we get a giant kind of sampling, you might have 100 cask samples and you go through one. And sometimes there can be so much variation. It's almost like they're from a completely different distillery, just based on the cask. Same spirit, same type of cask, side by side in the warehouse, and just that variation can be astonishing.
I do love that magic of single cask, how you can have, as you say, distilled on the same day, same cask type, sitting next to each other in the same warehouse. And when you pull them out after 3 years, after 4 years, even 10 years, whatever it is, they're two totally different spirits.
Yeah, that's right. I find it more amazing when they're alike, to be honest. Because what's the chances, right? It's like meeting a doppelganger, you know, like just on the road to Coles or something like that. So, yeah, no, it's very cool.
How many times does that happen in your life where you're walking somewhere in public, maybe not so much at the moment, again, in COVID times, and you see someone who looks remarkably like you, and you have that, what's going on here? Are you my long-lost brother or what?
Yeah, what's going on? Yeah.
This isn't supposed to happen. There's a glitch in the matrix somewhere.
Exactly.
Yeah, look, this is all great. So if we can just talk about the future now for a moment as well, whilst we're enjoying our drams. So we've seen, I'm going to make a wild prediction here. We've seen the past of Australian whiskey. So, and when I say past, I'm talking 1822 to about, I'm going to say safely 1965, which was sort of, you know, the formative years of distillation and probably some rough as guts stuff being made. And then we saw the new era, which started with, thanks to the likes of Lark Distillery and Cradle Mountain and whatnot, just distilling in the early 90s, all the way and for a while. And then, of course, 2014, Sullivan's Cove win the big award with their French oak. It was a single cask that won an award from Highland Holdings era of that distillery. That changed Australian whiskey for a lot of people. It changed it for the landscape of the spirit. So follow along with me here. And then I'd say from 2014 onwards, we saw I think I can safely say from 2014 to 2019, I think its own separate era, I'd say, of growth. So where do you think that 2020 to say maybe 2030 looks like for Australian spirit in general? I know that's a big question, but it's kind of like, what do you think the challenges and opportunities and the next steps are there?
Yeah, I mean, I've been asked that a few times, like just chatting to people, whether it's on air or not. I think it's a really complicated question. I think personally, where I would love to see it going is I think that as Australians and as Australian distillers, I think we should kind of do a little bit more ownership of the era and the history that you're talking about and you're describing there. I think that there was actually some amazing whiskey that was made back in the day. And we should own the fact that we have, like we were talking about just before we started, that there was legal distilling in Australia before Scotland. Like it was legal to distill in Australia before Scotland. So we've got an amazing history that we should really own as a spirits drinking nation. And, you know, it's people like this society that have helped that along. But in terms of the future, I think that really we're going to see some of the bigger guys starting to really put Australian spirits on the map. And it's already happening. And not just like the big awards like Sullivan's Cove and hopefully, you know, people pay attention to the Rye Whisky Award we won recently, which was the equivalent.
I think people are paying attention to it. Don't worry. I mean, I bought another 2 bottles just in case. Don't worry.
And the reason why I bring that up, it's not a shameless plug. It's because I think that it's really important for us as Australians in the world to acknowledge that we're making really top-notch spirits in Australia and we're doing it in our own way. And we've got our own unique history. And when we start to see some of the guys that are putting decent number of casks for their spirit come online, I think that it's going to be amazing to start to bring some top quality product to market and start to vie for shelf space against, you know, the American craft and big, you know, the double macro as well as the craft scene, as well as the Scotch whisky industry. I think it's never been more exciting. And I think that part of it has come down to the legislation and some of the innovation that we're allowed to do in Australia and the willingness to really just go there. Hey, like, I think there are some guys that are really smart and really switched on, and I think that the industry's got some real legs. That was very long.
Yeah. I'm getting some questions through on the stream that I might ask for us for you to answer. So Steve out of Melbourne asks, Dave, who are your whiskey heroes in the industry? And more importantly, who do you admire in the rum world? Over to you.
Okay. For me, I think one of my heroes when I was sort of starting out was Jim McEwen. You know, he was really a big sort of champion of Bruichladdich. And that was a beer of Bruichladdich where there was a lot of rebellion and sort of punk attitude and the odd year. Oh, I don't know what happened to the sound.
Sorry. All good.
So yeah, I mean, I think the Mark Renier area of Bruichladdich was pretty amazing. You know, I think at that time I read a book about Bruichladdich, and apparently they used to fly a flag over the distillery that just said bollocks, which was, you know, it was part of the punk attitude. I think it was sort of this whole idea that they weren't just going to do the same consistent old thing the way the big guys were going to do. They were going to forge their own path and do their own thing. And I kind of bought into that. So Jim McEwen was a big one for me. And from the rum world, look, I think that probably the easy answer would be someone like Richard Seale. Because,
I was about to say, I hope you say Richard Seale. That'd be amazing.
But I think probably one of my favourite personalities in the area is Luca Gargano. So he's an independent bottler of rum who has a company called Bellier. And I really just love the fact that he loves what he loves and he puts it in a bottle, and to hell if other people don't like it or not, and still people love it and sell it and buy it. I think that's really cool. That's really, really cool.
Yeah, that's awesome. Another question coming in from Zeno Davidoff, who asks, Dave, if someone came to you, what Archie Rose product would you tell them to buy and why? The answer is hand sanitizer, but go ahead, Dave. Sorry.
don't have any of that. Um, I don't know. I think it depends what they like. For me, probably one of the more exciting ones would be the rye, because I really like, for a whiskey drinker, putting the rye down in front of people and sort of taking them on that journey. It's not a single malt, it's not an American whiskey, it's something very different. So that'd probably be my stuff. But then we've done heaps of limited release white spirits as well. So it really depends what you're into. Yeah.
Another question coming through from a mutual friend of ours. Crafty asks, Dave, what do you think of Waterford and their path?
Okay. Yeah, so Waterford, it's a nice segue, Crafty. So Mark Renier sort of revived Brooklady, and then is obviously now involved with Waterford, and the whole idea is looking at provenance of the actual grain. Yeah, I think it'll be really interesting. I think they're just about to release their first cuvee, so it'll be interesting to see what they do. I'm really excited. I mean, I think that it's either going to be absolutely blow up the area and sort of really start to get people excited about terroir and, you know, the uniqueness of the barley and the farm and the aspect and so on, or they're going to come to market with a trillion different whiskies and people might get a little bit confused. But I think they've got a handle on it. I think they're going to do a really good job, and I think Mark is very clever. And if you haven't checked out Waterford, do have a look. They've got so much information on their website, and some of it goes really in depth. Like, they go into biodynamic barley and biodynamic wines and so on. Some of it's pretty crazy, but some of it's very legit. So yeah, it's pretty cool.
If anyone wants an inkling of what the previous Mark Renier era looked like, look at Brooklady 2001 to 2012 for that crazy, as I call the Heinz era of Brooklady, that I was a huge fan of where there was 57 varieties of different sources and different whiskies coming out. Some of them fantastic, some of them not so much, but it was all about some of the journey that came along with it.
I loved it because there was so much variation, right? You could pick up a bottle and you never knew what you were going to get, but you always knew you were going to get something very unique.
Yeah. Robert Akers says, there it is, the T word. He's referring to terroir, of course. We had a great discussion on the live a few weeks back about terroir and does it exist, and so it was a good fun chat.
Okay, who did you have the chat with?
No, that was just one of my live streams.
You were just talking ahead about terroir.
Yeah. Of course.
So what's your opinion about terroir, Matt?
I think it exists, but I think it's overstated.
Okay, that's an interesting one.
I know that sounds like a fence sitter kind of argument, but I think it exists. But I think it can be overmarketed and overstated in spirit. I think it's far more effective to talk about in wine and even in beer sometimes, but in spirit, I think it's a little bit. It's there, but it is often sort of like talking too much about it, if that makes sense.
I think it's an interesting one, and without sort of opening that can of worms that you're conveniently trying to put a lid back on. I agree. Look, I think in distilling, and I think Mark Renier actually at Waterford puts this really well. He says that the distillation process is very destructive, and it kind of is. Like, to a lot of that terroir and that character and so on, it can be very destructive. But I also think that it's up to the distillery and the distiller to lean into those things that make things different and the terroir and so on. And I don't think people have done that much, and I think that it should be done a little bit more. So I think that in the next 10 years, we're going to see some really great examples of where terroir can be absolutely shown to have a big impact. Because I'll give you an example, right? So let's go through an example. So in Scotland, everyone uses the same barley variety. So if everyone uses the same barley variety and the same yeasts, and their stills are made by the same 3 companies, and they're put in the same casks from the same distilleries in the US, but yet you pick up a Talisker and it smells like pepper and it smells like sea, how has that occurred? and I think that's the magic and the interest for me, is that despite the fact there's so much that's the same, there can still be this like beautiful and amazing thing that occurs because of that difference in that place.
Mm.
So for me in Australia, you take that and you say, you've probably heard me talk about this before, Matt, but
Mm.
you talk about how a barley would grow in red dirt in 40-degree heat, with eucalyptus trees in Australia, under big blue skies. It's surely going to create a completely different whiskey. And I think the San Diego rye that you're
Mm.
in that probably shows that. I think that if you put that side by side, and I'll do this for you at some stage, I'll find a sample filled from very similar batches in the warehouse, and there'll be completely different whiskies. And part of that's come down to the actual raw ingredients and the way it's been treated.
So, and those raw ingredients are obviously the treatment of such. So, do you think that well, I mean, I'll come back to that point. Ryan on our page says terroir is dead and it hasn't existed since the invention of the container ship.
Okay.
Okay. We'll have to leave that one as a comment. I think that's where we'll come up to leaving it here. Well, a couple last questions, of course. Fiona says, do you think that Waterford will be similar in sense of the different barrels, aka Sassicaia, etc.?
I have no idea. I think they're using a lot of wine casks, Waterford. So Mark Renier's background, I'm almost doing a plug for Waterford tonight.
We'll leave that one. We'll leave that one though. He does have a background in wine, and he has a background in experimentation. So we'll see what comes out of that. But instead of a plug for Waterford, which is not what we're here to talk about, is there any sneak peeks of the future of what we might see, either trials, exceptions, or core range out of Archie Rose in the next few months?
I think single malt is the next one to come off. So we've been a little bit delayed by COVID, if I'm honest. So we didn't want to release it when there's obviously people that aren't in a great place and stuck up indoors and what have you. So single malt will definitely be on the radar really soon. So we're really excited for that one. I mean, we've been making that for over 5 years now. So it's really exciting to share what we've been doing with that.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of whiskey enthusiasts keeping an eye out for that single malt release of yours, which is very exciting.
Yeah, no, we've got a lot of really cool stuff that's gone into it. So a lot of R&D and a lot of work. So yeah, it'd be really, really nice to share a dram at the end of it and finally get it out.
And I'm hoping that you and I can share that dram together in person, maybe once this all quietens down.
Maybe, yeah. No, I look forward. It'll be good.
Zeno asks, Dave, is there any new white spirits coming through in 2020-21, like an Archie Mite V2 or something in the new make scene?
There won't be an Archie Mite, no. I toyed around for a while and it didn't get that much enthusiasm about doing a meat pie spirit. I think you've tried this, Matt.
I was very lucky to taste the meat pie spirit. I strangely love-hated it, if that makes sense. No, it was like one of those spirits that I hated how much I loved it.
Yeah, no, that's pretty accurate. There wasn't that much enthusiasm from the rest of the team about a meat pie base. So that one is
my complete surprise.
It's not hard to figure out why. But yeah, so there'll be no Archie Mite too, but we've got a lot of other cool stuff. I mean, we took sort of a little bit of a spoiler alert, I guess. I think I can get away with talking about this, but we took about 48,000 litres of smoke-tainted wine. So we had grapes, about 50 tonnes of grapes smoke-tainted from the Hunter Valley. And we've made some spirits, so we're kind of toying with at the moment whether we let people have a little taste of that before it's gone into barrel, which would be pretty cool because it is a pretty unique kind of spirit. But yeah, we're always toying with something, I guess.
Yeah, it's experimentation. And once you've got your new distillery on board, you'll have a bit more of a sandpit to work with there, I guess, as well.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, awesome. Another question coming through. Ryan asks, he asks, "Hey Dave, how much interaction do the salespeople at Archie Rose have with the production team? As in, how much of an ear do you give them?"
Yeah, a lot. Yeah, a lot. I mean, we've the sales guys are all around. So we've got a brand ambassador in Sydney, one in Melbourne, one in WA, and we're hiring for one in Queensland at the moment. And they come to town every couple of months, and usually they'll walk around the distillery. They've done actual distilling days where they get in there, they connect hoses, they turn pumps on, they do the whole thing. Yeah, it's really important. And as we're developing products, we kind of show them what we're working on and what's coming through the pipeline. So yeah, it's definitely really very important.
So the sale,
we love sharing.
Yeah, you guys are always very transparent and open in what you're doing, so it doesn't surprise me. But I guess the crux of it is, do they sort of say that, like, they might say to you, "Oh, that meat pie spirit's not going to sell." So does the sales ever dictate the production?
Not really, no. It's more about every single department, all the heads of department get together and we have a chat about what we want to make. And then it's really about what inspires us, and it has to have a reason. Like we're talking before about a reason for being. So it has to have like that reason. It has to be like, well, why are we going to put this in a bottle and expect people to pay money for it? And usually the answer to that is because we think it's a really cool spirit and we want to showcase what we're up to, which is fine, and probably the best one. But yeah, we've never had a thing where we go to make something and the sales team say, "Oh, we're going to struggle to make that. We're going to struggle to sell that. Sorry, so we can it." We've never had that.
No, okay, that's very cool to know. And then another comment. We're going to take this one as a comment, of course. Ryan also says, "Archie Malt was a thing of glory, and anyone who says otherwise is due a knuckle sandwich from me."
That is an awesome comment.
That's a proper review. There you go.
Archie Malt is definitely one of those ones where maybe someone should have stopped it from being made. Like I had a moment with the owner Will where it had just been bottled and we kind of saw the bottle and we just looked at each other and said, "What have we done? Like, we started making this thing, no one stopped us, and now we've got this crazy thing."
Just the way that my nerd brain works in these scenarios, the first thing I thought of when you were producing this yeast extract Archie Malt spirit was, man, I wonder how hard it's going to be to clean the still after that one.
Dude. So, interestingly, it's like it self-cleans, but it just stinks. It just stinks real bad.
Awesome. Hi to Dave Phillips. Hi to Jane Overeem. Hi to Dan Woolley. Thanks everyone for tuning in. I think that's I think that might just be the end of the Q&A for Dave there. I really appreciate your time, Dave. Thank you so much for tuning in on this live stream and talking to people about what's coming up, the future, the past, everything a bit about Archie there, a bit of an informal chat. It's been really good. I really appreciate it. And thank you again for taking the time out of your Tuesday night to do a live with us.
Thanks for having me, mate. That's awesome.
Always a pleasure. And we'll catch you all tomorrow night for Whisky Roundtables tomorrow night for those who follow on the nightly schedule of every single night that we do live here. And I'll catch you all soon. A big round of applause for Dave. And to those who are saying, "Oh, they missed out," sorry, yes, Jane, it's always going to be up on our channel. It's always going to be up on the group. It's going to be on YouTube, Facebook page, Facebook group, Twitter, bits and bobs everywhere. So don't worry, you won't be able to miss out. You'll see it everywhere shortly. Thanks again, Dave.
Thanks for having me, Matt. Awesome.
Well,